Not really yet.
That makes sense. I mean, it looks like it's working, so I think that should do the trick. Yeah, cool.
Okay, I'll buy a new mic.
Sweet. Here's this, I guess.
Oh, wait, is there another plug to this?
Yeah, but that doesn't. We don't use that for this. Like we
Okay.
have it, but it doesn't.
It work
goes,
for this?
Yeah, it
Okay.
goes straight in. But it's
weird
all
'cause
good.
It doesn't work on the microphone, on the camera. If I just have to use this in order for it to work, it's so weird.
Right,
No
we ready
worries.
there?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Sorry for the delay, everybody. We were ready like an hour ago, and since our microphone stopped working, so we're gonna change course and use this one. So everyone here in the room should be just fine. We just want to make sure that folks that are joining us online can hear us well as well. So thank you for your patience. Really excited to be here today. I've been looking forward to this particular lecture presentation for quite some time, actually. We'll get into that in a second. But first, a couple of housekeeping announcements. I would like to remind everybody who's here in person, please silence your phones if you haven't done so already, so we don't get any interruptions there. There are refreshments and water and coffee and tea possibly here for you. If you're fine. Any one of us that works here at the Museum of Idaho is more than happy to help you out while you're here. My name is Jeff. I'm the Senior Director for External Affairs, and it's one of my enjoyable duties to be able to oversee this presentation series. My colleagues here in the back are Kim, Jill, and Caitlin, all here, and anyone can help you at any point. So, a couple of quick announcements. First of all, thanks for everyone who came to our museum member meal last Friday. That was a lot of fun. It was nice to see you all here. We will do it again. Our haunted history tours for this year start tomorrow night. So, those of you who have tickets, we are excited to see you. Those of you who do not have tickets, sorry, it's been sold out for a long time. Catch you next year. We have some exciting upcoming museum club events as well. The next 3 on our docket are all unique in some way or another. So take note here. Next one, Thursday, November 3rd, will be our behind the scenes exhibit tour of Toytopia with our esteemed exhibit team, Zen Hansen, Chloe Doucette, and Christina Franson. That should be a lot of fun. The unique note on this tour is that it will not be available via Zoom. That is an in-person event only. Sorry for those of you who are elsewhere. You just gotta get here. So that's November 3rd. One after that, November 17th, also a Thursday, of course, called Flint Knapping, Stone Tools in the First Idahoans, with Tim Mullen, who is a world-renowned flint knapper and an anthropologist as well. He will, this event will include a talk on the history of one of the world's very oldest skills that unites cultures throughout the world, followed by, for those who would like to stick around, a hands-on demonstration. We'll bring extra tools. You can try it out for yourself, and hopefully no one will hurt themselves. And on December 1st, our Thursday event will not be at 3 o'clock. This is going to be a special evening engagement of Museum Club called The Playful World of a Toy Designer. We have Stephanie Eskander coming, who is a very prolific toy designer who has worked for Play School, Mattel, Hasbro, Tonka, and others, and designed all sorts of toys that you probably remember potentially have in your home. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. So there will be no daytime session on that day, just the evening session here on December 1st. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Zen Hansen. So Zen found us here several months ago upon learning that we have a very interesting, many call it creepy, hair-based artifact upstairs in our Way Out West exhibit. And Zen said, you know, this is kind of my thing, actually. And so we've been working on this for a long time. I'm really excited about it. Zen is a mom to 3 human teenagers, she says, and a bunch of floofy foster kittens. She works in the fly fishing industry and is a student at the College of Eastern Idaho. And she says, hair anthropology is my passion project, trying to understand hair as a resource and manipulate it as a hair artist. She creates custom jewelry using this nearly lost technique. And so without further ado, Zen Hansen with Idaho's Hairy History. What can artifacts made of human hair teach us about the past, present, and future? Part 1.
Guys. So here, thanks for everyone who came out today, including everyone who's joining in online. Although this talk highlights Idaho's hairy history, I think you'll find relatable things no matter where you live. So let's get started. What is a crop that we all grow that doesn't require any extra land, water, or energy to produce, and we throw most of the way down our drains and in the trash daily? It's solid yet flexible, it's lightweight, it absorbs oil and water, it protects us from thermal insulation, and it degrades slowly. Our hair. Today, I want to challenge your perspectives about what happens to the hair after it comes off of our heads and we're finished. So, first, a little about me. I typically describe myself as an eccentric introvert. I have an insatiable curiosity for what many people consider to be odd things. The outliers that give us variety and spice in life are the things that I love the most. My interest in hair has particularly developed over a long period of time because of a disorder that I struggle with called trichotillomania. It's a hair pulling disorder. I repetitively and unconsciously pick at my head hair. Some say it's caused by anxiety, but I call it overthinking. Eventually, I got really curious about this fiber that was in front of me, and I wondered how I might transform it from something that had been torturing me for years to something beautiful. So I was inspired to learn various hair art techniques, some of which have been really challenging to learn because they're nearly lost and forgotten methods. And I even managed to craft my own fly fishing line. And a good friend of mine made flies from my hair as well. And I was able to successfully fish with them and caught the Idaho state fish cutthroat trout, along with some grayling as well. It was great. So here I am today trying to understand this unique fiber as a material resource through an artist's lens. I've had the privilege of pursuing this research for the last 10 months, and here I am today. This is where I begin to share a little bit of what I found. Obviously, couldn't include everything today. It's an immense project, but hopefully you enjoy it. So, I want to begin with a little history tour, noting that hair is an organic material. It's natural, so it typically breaks down within just a few years. So unless it's preserved in some manner, we don't really find hair that's very old. And I suspect that humans have been utilizing hair as a resource in all sorts of ways for millennia, but we just don't know. So I love this meme by Ryan Starkey that illustrates this idea. Since hair isn't preserved in fossils, we can't rule out the possibility that dinosaurs look like this. So, an interesting fact, humans are the only mammals that grow long hair on our heads. There is no other species on Earth that grows long hair from their heads, as well as we are we're the only species that has curly hair. And we don't quite understand why that is yet. I also wanted to highlight that I think we all know that we were not the first people to live here on this land we now call Idaho. The Shoshone and Bannocks currently reside on the Fort Hall Reservation just south of us here. And while I don't have the capacity to speak for the indigenous peoples today in regards for their hair traditions and their cultural beliefs, what I'm presenting today is coming from my own experience growing up in the American West and through my understanding of the resources that are available to me. So what can artifacts made of human hair teach us about the past, present, and future? Even more specifically, let's observe how the culture around us influences our feelings and about the hair on our heads, and ultimately what we choose to do with it. Just like Jeff mentioned, the first hair artifact I really got interested in came across is right here at the Museum of Idaho in the Way Out West exhibit. Made in 1865, this large wreath containing many smaller individual wire-worked hair flowers is quite a spectacle. The sign underneath it tells us this wreath is made from Margaret Daly's students, the hair from. She was a teacher in Iowa, and she brought this wreath with her as she migrated west. So this wreath was made in the Victorian era, and that's really important for us to understand because in 1861, Queen Victoria's beloved husband died, Prince Albert, and she adored him. She went into a really deep mourning. Here we see she's got a photograph of him in her hands that she's looking at. And she popularized a mourning culture for decades, and she increased the public's demand for things related to her mourning culture, such as hair mementos. This heart-shaped jewel was worn by the queen that contained the hair from the prince when he was a child. So remember, again, this is before photographs were widely available. So physically having something of somebody that you loved, especially if you were separated from them, was really cherished. So just like the Catholic tradition of consecrating the physical remains of saints as holy relics under church altars, hair served as secular sentimental relics in the family home. Hair wasn't only kept upon someone's death, though, for mourning. Trinkets were exchanged as tokens of love and friendship among the living too. So this wreath upstairs is precisely that. It's a memento for Margaret to remember her students by as they parted ways. I imagine going from Iowa to Idaho back then was like us sending some of our hair to Mars. Like it would have been an incredible adventure. Underneath the hair wreath, we have this other bulbous container on display with a little hole in the top. And these were placed on dressing tables for collecting hair sheds to use in wigs and other keepsakes. So this is where I wanted to show you this hair receiver that I have, as well as my modern day hair receiver. I don't know what's going to happen if I put this microphone down. We'll see. So we would brush here. So the Victorians were undoubtedly very prolific in terms of the amount and the variety of things that they created with hair. And because of the methods that they used to make the things that they did, it preserved the hair really well. So we have the most surviving hair artifacts to observe from the Victorian era. People wove hair, they sewed hair, they braided hair, they painted with hair, they glued hair in all sorts of magnificent ways. Methods and patterns for working with hair were either passed down through generational knowledge or found in newspapers and popular home journals at the time. Mark Campbell, an American, even published a book in 1867 titled Self-Instructor in the Art of Hair Work. And this is the same book I use today for most of my table braiding patterns. Although Margaret's hair rig was not made here in Idaho, I was able to find historical evidence that hair work was crafted here in various ways. In the late 1800s, not too far from here in Bear Lake, on the border of Utah, the LDS pioneer women continued a Scandinavian tradition of making table braided watch chains as well as crafted hair flowers. One of the table braiding patterns they used to make watch chains was in an article published in Western Folklore in 1959. And it does contain the pattern and instructions for braiding a watch chain, and I have it set up very roughly with horsehair on the table here. A few of these women's hair treasures are on display in the Paris, Idaho Tabernacle. In the middle, we see right here, two framed flat work hair patterns with blonde hair, and it's the signs that they were made by Ella Tobin with the hair of her mother. And on the right, we see a large, again, wire worked wreath, but unfortunately I couldn't read the information because they were unable to open the cabinet for me that day. And then more from Bear Lake on the left is another lovely dark hair chain that's probably made of horsehair, and this was worn by Sarah J. Richmiller. And on the right here, an intricate domed bouquet of wire-worked flowers made by Nancy Pugmire from the hair of the women who served in church positions with her at the time. And Nancy's obituary of 1939 mentioned she was a teacher, a postmaster, and she sent the first telegraph to the governor of Utah. She's quite the woman. On the west side of the state, in Boise, we see similar examples of Victorian hair work in the collection of the Idaho State Museum. These teardrops earrings and this brooch in the middle, as well as this magnificent family wreath comprised of more wire-work flowers. This is a very popular method. And this is from 27 different individuals. It was started in Illinois in 1879 and finished in Boise in 1933. Some ladies even entered their hair work in the fairs, in the early Idaho fairs. So Miss Samuel Walker has a bouquet of hair work showing more skill and taste than we know how to describe. And best hair wreath went to Mrs. Brierly of Clarkson. If you didn't have the time or the right equipment to make the hair work yourself, you could hire it out. So one of the first advertisements for hair jewelry I found was in 1882. And Mrs. Hebert is a dealer in hair goods. A specialty is made of making all kinds of hair jewelry. And she says an intention is called to recently discovered process in working combings. She says she's located next to the Central Hotel, and here's a picture of the Central Hotel before it burned down a few years later. Who else had a lot of time on their hands? Prisoners. An article dated 1900 was one of my favorites to find. It said, how prisoners show that they are not new to jails. And Sheriff Campbell of Boise described how a prisoner's actions could indicate prior incarceration. And the sheriff said, and he will pay them by making them hair ornaments, watch chains, and other like gimcracks. The worker in hair is certain to be an old timer. It is a test that never fails. This photo below is an example of some hair work chains that I brought with me today. I have on loan from Museum of Very Strange. That shows a style that is very similar style that these were crafted in the Civil War era by Civil War prisoners. Hair crafting is also linked to Western cowboy life through utility in ropes. I found many mentions of ropes, lariats, and bridles crafted from human and horse hair because they're both made of the same keratin protein. And horsehair was, of course, exceedingly abundant material at the time, at least until cars came to town. And the fun fact, human hair, did I say this already? No, is stronger than horsehair. It has a tensile strength similar to steel. So it's actually really strong. This 1898 article from the Idaho Statesman informed travelers that experienced campers, when they fear the rattlesnakes, encircle their camp with a hair lariat or two and feel security. And later there was some argument whether this was like folklore or not, if it was really true. But in this 1919 edition of Popular Mechanics, they proved that these ropes could work so long as the rope was not smooth and that it had enough prickly hairs coming out of it everywhere to irritate the snake as it tried to crawl up, it would go away. So next time you're camping, take some hair work. And then this clip also from the Blackfoot News in 1893 tells us of a man, Carlos Gutierrez, a Mexican cowboy who carried a curious lariat made from the hair sheds of his mother and wife. It goes on to say that he would never sell it because it is a talisman against death in the saddle and brings good luck with the cattle. Interestingly enough, too, gorgeous horsehair items are still handcrafted and sold by inmates through the Montana State Prison Hobby Store in Deer Lodge, Montana today. So beyond Idaho, the news published other interesting human hair innovations from around the world. People long ago recognized its utility as a substitute for textiles. And one of my first personal favorites is from the Idaho Statesman in 1893, made of human hair, a suit of armor worn by a South Sea Islander. 1905, stockings made of human hair imported from China that last a lifetime. And in 1911, human hair cloth that is absolutely unbreakable, unshrinkable, and uncreasable. I found so many interesting examples of hair work. It was hard to choose what to include today, but I'm getting to my point. All of this industrious hair waste and utilization and crafting, and yet we see this pretty sharp decline happen right at the turn of the 20th century when we hit 1900, 1910. And it starts coming to the halt. So why? There are more than a few reasons for this, but I'm going to give you 5 today that directly affected us. 1, the Native American, or first of all, the war between the Native Americans and the Settler Wars. We talked about earlier how we weren't the first people to arrive here in Idaho. So one of the most shocking things I think I came across during this research, at least for myself to find out, was that scalping, a tool of war, was an atrocious method used by both sides to intimidate each other during the 1860 to 1890 conflicts. This 1866 article describes a rally for 25 town citizens to go Indian hunting and bring back scalps. I believe that this would have certainly complicated sentiments towards the use of hair beyond our heads. With scalps being displayed in museums up until the 1990s, before the Native American Graves Protection and Emancipation Act was put into place, and many of those sacred remains were returned. 2, germs. The next reason for the decline in hair work came from germs and the idea that hair contained and spread them. Thanks to Louis Pasteur, who discovered germ theory in 1861, people were now aware of and concerned about hygiene in relation to spreading disease. So this column from the Emmett Index in 1894 informed readers that dealing in human hair is a peculiar business. A great deal comes from the garbage piles, and hair retains disease germs longer than anything else. Third, there were more seeds of doubt this time cast upon hair work profession. In the Mountain Home Bulletin, an author published a warning to mourners to be wary of the questionable business of hair work. And in Tricks in All Trades in 1901, the article cautions readers saying, a young man secures a lock of hair from his sweetheart, but often he does not receive back the hair he gave. Whose hair is it then? 4, Queen Victoria dies. She dies in 1901, marking the end of a grand era, including the popularity of sentimental hair work. Everyone was so tired of keeping up the fashions after 4 decades. That's changed. And finally, what I believe to be the last blow to hair crafting arrived in the 1920s. Following the women's suffrage movements and World War I, ladies had had enough of their long hair and started to chop off their big, biblically hailed crowning glories. This was a really big deal. There were employee bans, national movements to ban women from wearing their hair short. But we can see here in the 1922 Idaho Statesman that Boise women and girls were foregoing old baths by bobbing locks and shaving their necks. The bob became the fashion, literally cutting loose the hair chains and figuratively symbolizing the independence and freedom women demanded. Not unlike current worldwide events we see happening right now. Additionally, at this time, safety razors had just been commodified, now allowing men and women to safely remove unwanted hair at home. So it was an all-out assault on hair. The grand era of loving hair was, and what was only fashionable on the head, otherwise was over. Now, that doesn't mean that hair work in various forms didn't continue after the 1920s, but the utility was sporadic and it has never been quite the same. There was a short resurgence in the 1940s and the 1950s related to World War II. My favorite example being this one. Does your hair get frizzy and unruly when the weather changes? The concept is rather simple. The change in humidity in the air can be observed by measuring the change in tension hair strands make as it soaks up the moisture from the air. These are called hygrometers or hydrometers. This article from 1944 shares that 5,280 women of America made hair donations during World War II for the use in weather balloon hygrometers. And this picture shows an example of an original 1957 American-made hair element for inside a hair hygrometer that I brought with me today. So, unfortunately, during this time, we know what was happening with World War II. In Europe, this period for them wasn't as uniting hair-wise as it was for us. One of the biggest roadblocks my hair friends mentioned in Europe is the residual impact and feelings surrounding the horrendous treatment of Jewish people and their hair by the Nazis. A disgusting but repeated theme we see throughout history. So let's wrap this up. What can we learn from all these historical hair utility, sentimental crafting, and science experiments? I believe learning about these things can help us appreciate hair's traditions and roles in the past, but most importantly, they can inspire us to imagine a future where hair waste utilization is understood. So how do we feel about our hair today? Well, we spend a lot of money on it, between going to the salon and cutting it and dyeing it and shampoos and hair products. We tend to really love our hair, right? But once we cut it or it falls out, it's worthless. So we throw it away and we buy new hair. According to the numbers, at least, that's what the data shows. I haven't fully deciphered all the Comtrade data numbers yet, but you can see right here, they're really large. These are just the import numbers for the US for 2021. And wow, Americans in particular spend a lot of money purchasing imported human hair wigs and extensions, and yet we, the consumers, don't even know or care where the hair came from, but we're willing to put it back on our head. What we don't know can't hurt us, right? Maybe we should just. The ratio of our hair consumption versus our contributions are extremely skewed. Every once in a while, you'll see someone donating their beloved tresses to Locks for Love. There's a few national recycling programs out there that salons could use. I don't know of any in Idaho that do, but otherwise it's just garbage, and it goes down our drains. And maybe we should ask plumbers how they feel about that, because hair clogs are bad. Should we even care where our hair goes? Like, maybe. So, what does our hairy future hold? If necessary, if necessity is the mother of invention, and we are concerned about daunting environmental issues like plastics, pollution, global warming, and the need to find alternative solutions, here is a global and local, natural, and sustainable option right in front of us. What if we were to consider our local needs and consider the impact that voluntary hair waste recycling programs could have to our local communities and economies? What would that look like? And just to be clear, I'm not asking anyone to cut or style or do anything differently with their hair, other than I'm curious about what happens to the natural shedding and the natural, like, just salon waste. So, visual example again. Last month, this is what I collected from my natural sheds. And I'm a visual learner, so to me, this looks like a lot, but it shows you that just naturally, we're getting rid of hair. And in fact, we shed more hair in the fall, just like trees do. So if you feel like you're shedding a lot more right now, you probably are, and that's normal. Don't be worried about it. So my point is that the resource is here, and there are many different applications for it. So from simple things like putting it in our gardens as a fertilizer, because it's actually a really good fertilizer, to robes and fabrics and high-tech applications. Here I'm giving you an example of, this is Sonic, this is hair robes that she makes in the UK. This is human material loop. Sophia, she's trying to create textiles with hair right now. She's got a spinning method going on. And Romy Kaiser of Germany created this new material out of hair, pressing it with a really high-powered press to create what she calls Caraplast. say, a bio alternative friendly plastic alternative. So the amount of it, maybe you can see some historical themes kind of running along here with what we've seen earlier. But the amount of utility that humans have applied from hair waste astounds me. There's just one problem. No one wants to talk about hair or research hair. People have really shied away from discussing hair beyond just like cultural fashion. You know, we hear a lot about like how it's fashionable or different cultural like methods of styling hair, but not very many people talk about it as research. And why is this? Well, I don't quite understand. I'm trying to understand all the things going into it, but it's a complicated topic that is entwined into so many different aspects of our lives. And I think we all have kind of thorny relationships with our hair, or lack of hair, or excess hair. You know, we love it here, but we don't want it here, or here, or here. Like, hair's complicated, weird. And then, of course, there's those ethical controversies that we've talked about surrounding the circumstances of cutting someone's hair and their consent for it. And that is necessary for us to consider in this whole equation. I think we humans need to learn to respect hair's cultural diversity, yet overcome using it as a method of power and control and division against each other. We all grow and carry the same remarkable fiber. It's just a slightly different variation. Literally the same thing though. And finally, I think I lost my last note, so okay. So yeah, how do we break through these cultural and historical barriers to make progress? I'm not sure it's going to happen overnight, but I think the answer lies in each one of us as individuals. To kind of ponder and nudge the parameters of our current ideas and understandings about our hair. And finally, one point my partner Zach, a sci-fi fan, likes to highlight is that when humans start going to Mars, they're going to want to need to utilize hair because it's going to be a limited resource that we have up there. So now that we're not in Idaho anymore, we're out of this world. I finished with part one. That's Idaho's hairy history in a nutshell. I'm going to take questions, and then after we're done with any questions, you're welcome to come up here and see a lot of the hair work that I have either alone from the Museum of the Very Strange or artwork that I've made myself. And I can show you that closer. Questions?
What makes hair a good fertilizer and how do you use it in your garden? Down in there or?
Sure. So she asked, what makes hair a good fertilizer and how do we use it in our gardens? Yeah, so hair is an organic material, it's carbon-based. And from what studies have shown, it has all the properties that we need from a fertilizer. It feeds the nitrogen and gives all the minerals. But not only, and there's several different ways you can use it. You literally can just throw it into your garden and it'll decompose over a number of years, like maybe 3 or 4. So, and by doing that, you're also providing structure to the ground because you've got some structure. There are also ways of dissolving it down into liquid fertilizers to do quick release as well. So it really is just, it can be composted.
Do you have an example of the wire work that was shown in the Victorian.
Yeah, so this is some wire work I've made. Of course, here, over here.
So a question from the Zoom chat is, do you have any tips for encouraging others to think more openly about hair?
Do I have any tips for encouraging others to think more openly about hair? Oh, I wish. Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that, honestly. I just think that if we contemplate new ideas, then maybe we can imagine a different future, you know. So, and just, I think I'm finding myself as more of an advocate now for human hair as a material resource. So even if I can't come up with these crazy scientific ideas or do them myself, I can advocate for it. So if other people can also advocate for it, I think it's a good idea.
And I have a question. So how did you like collect all of your shedded hair like into such an organized bunch?
Sure. You're asking how I collected all my hair into an organized bunch. I literally just shove it into the tissue box as I'm
Oh, as you're
combing
brushing,
every
right?
day. And then about once a week, I pull it out of the tissue box in a big jumble, it's a big mess. And I patiently pull it one strand at a time. And it doesn't look like a jumbled mess because if you have actually bought human hair before, there's a word that they use that's called Rennie hair. And Rennie hair means that it's sorted from root to tip because hair has cuticles on it. So if you were to turn them the wrong way, they kind of fight against each other. So these are sorted from root to tip because I can feel it as I'm sorting them out, which way to turn them.
So that's just from brushing. It's not from like your pillow or, wow, that's really impressive.
Well, I do collect them off my pillow and stuff, but so these are just the sheds from the brush and the pillow or whatever that I've managed to collect. Yeah, I just pick up. It's probably not all of them. I'm sure I lose, you know, a bunch, but I just was super curious because I read once that you shed on an average between 50 and 100 hairs a day, and I thought, I wonder like where I'm at in that. So I do have like a log here. I've been collecting, and it's my own little science project. And unfortunately, or fortunately, this month in the first half, I'm averaging like nearly 200 sheds a day. Remember when I told you we shed more in the fall? My data is telling me that.
That's really cool.
My hairbrush tells me that too.
Thanks for confirming.
There's an argument that because we said one fall, that is one of the proofs that Homo sapiens evolved in the southern hemisphere where the fall, we think that was actually spring when you drop hair because of the starting in summer.
Interesting.
So I'm curious, so the US is importing all sorts of human hair. Where is this coming from and how is it being sourced? Do you know?
Yeah, so let's see if I can cross here. There is, he asked that we're having all this human hair coming in to the US and where is it coming from and being sourced from. There is this awesome book, Entanglement by Dr. Emma Tarlow. She is a anthropologist in the UK. I believe this was from 2016, maybe. And she spent a decade investigating the hair trade. So she tells us that most of the hair is being imported from India and China. In India, they typically go through tonsure as part of their cultural word. But yes, they cut their hair at temples in a tonsuring method, and then the temples sell the hair to the wig market trade. Yeah.
So I know you have a ring that you made. How many strands of hair did it take to make that ring?
Yeah, okay, so I made this ring for my 40th birthday this year, and collected 40 gray hairs to braid down the center of it. And I don't know off the top of my head. Of course, I have it written down. It's like on my blog, you know, the map, like 16 strands and 30 or 45 hairs each strand. So it's a few hundred hairs, but I just collected 3,000 last month. So when clients come to me sometimes and ask for hair jewelry to be made, you don't have to cut your hair. You can just collect it for a little while, and I just need, you know, so long depending on what method is being utilized, but you don't have to do anything extra.
You just mentioned you have a blog. How would we access that?
Yeah, so my website is hairanthropology.com, and I say blog, but Instagram is usually where I share most of my in progress, you know, research and what I'm digging into, and it's hair anthropology as well.
Is there one color that's more valuable? That's
Historically, yes, that would be white, and white is different than gray. But yes, historically, the white hair has always been the most precious and the, you know, most valuable. So I call them unicorns. I like them.
Sweet. Another question from Zoom. Jenny's asking, how did you learn how to do hair work techniques?
How did I learn how to do hair work techniques? Yes. Well, all over the place. Mostly I started with the book I showed you from Mark Campbell, Art and the Instructor of Hair Work. He does give really clear instructions on there, but it's just a lot of trial and error over the last couple of years, and then also connecting with other hair workers online and asking questions. Just being brave enough to connect with people and ask lots of questions.
Is white valuable because it can dye different colors?
She's asking if white is valuable because it can dye it different colors. I don't know. Maybe, but I think most hair is just bleached and then dyed whatever color. So I think it's just because most hair you can't get to the white. So I don't know that you want to dye, you know. Oh, yes.
On her question, like white is more valuable, it might be because of supply and demand. There's less white than other hair colors.
Yes, this man mentioned that white might be more valuable because of supply and demand, and you're right. I bet white is less supply, so
I've heard that red hair is kind of.
actually, I think, yeah, second most red, definitely. Red is the most rare.
And there are fewer redheads today than there were.
Yes, yes, I believe so. You always hear that redheads will go extinct someday.
What about a white hair from a redhead?
White hair from a redhead. Now we talk.
My red hairs went white first.
Oh,
I used to be a dark brunette, believe it or not, with red highlights. And what went white, gray first, or the red ones.
Red went gray first, huh? Interesting. Huh. I actually, in doing all this research, was surprised to find out how little we understand about hair, like scientifically. So there's a lot of work to be done still. All right. Well, I think, yeah, that could be it. And you're welcome to come up and see everything.